and had meditated, and so I had enough confidence that she would be able to handle the pain. Because what morphine does is clouds awareness, it clouds clarity, it clouds mindfulness. And the Buddha said that your last thought moment is very crucial and very critical for the next life. Because how the mind is will condition, will spark the future birth. So if you're dying, then one wants to die with clarity and with calm, and not under the delusion or the distraction of some heavy drugs. A lot of people, the reason that they'll give or take morphine at their time of death is basically fear, isn't it? Fear of pain. The fear that I won't be able to handle the pain. The fear that we won't be able to be in control. The fear that it will be overcoming of us. But that's where, if you develop meditation, what you start to do is you actually start to observe the nature of feeling. We start when we're sitting here, like all of you are sitting here and you're feeling pain in the body. So what we do is, instead of reacting to it with like and dislike, we're saying, what is its nature? What is its characteristic? What is happening here? And then when we observe the arising and passing away, that feeling arises, stays, passes away, arises, passes away. It's endlessly coming and endlessly going. And when we see that it's endlessly arising and passing away, then we realize that it's not a me doing this, it's just a process happening. Just like the sun rising and passing away, rising and passing away, rising and setting. It's got nothing to do with me, it just naturally happens. Feeling arises and passes away. Then what happens is one gives up the fear of pain and just watches. And that ability to give up fear of pain and just know and watch gives incredible strength and power of mind, and incredible freedom of mind too, to not be under the control of fear. And therefore one can observe. And there are many people who have come to our Buddhist community who have come to learn meditation because of chronic pain. And often the way they actually teach people to deal with chronic pain is not through dependency on drugs, but actually through clarity and awareness of pain and the neutral observation of the nature of the pain, so that the mind separates from the pain. And when the mind separates from the pain, you become aware of the process. Just like when the mind is aware of the process of sleeping, you can know then. You don't get caught up in the process. So too, you can be aware of the process of feeling and not get caught up in the process. So too, you can be aware of the process of death and not be caught up in the process of death. One of the things that actually also happens in the process of dying is that the body functions start to turn off, don't they? The first thing we notice when someone's dying is obviously their ability to move becomes limited. Their ability to speak stops and slows down and stops. Their ability to open their eyes and interact stops. And so the body functions are slowing down and coming to stillness. And what happens is the last of the sense organs, which are shutting off, the eyes shut, the nose, the sense of smell, taste, touch, shuts off. But the last one to shut off is the ear. Hearing is usually the last thing to go. And so that's why it's actually very important to be very mindful of what you say around a person who is dying. To say wise things, skillful things, beneficial things, caring things. And that can be absorbed and be known by the person. And then when the hearing shuts off, that's usually the time when then the mind will go to brilliance, go to a light, when karma will come up, and then the mind, if the person is to die, is going to break up. And the mind will break up and go on to a new rebirth. Now it's actually very interesting that recently in the Lancet they had an article on near-death experiences, and they've done a scientific study which has just been printed in the Lancet, and I saw a copy of it the other day, where some Dutch scientists had a group of people, and they found that about 10% of that group of people, I think it was a fairly large survey group, had a near-death experience, an experience where the death process had happened, the body was shutting down, they couldn't feel, they couldn't speak, they couldn't taste, touch, hearing ceased, and then they had an experience in the mind of some process, usually a description. They described seeing a light, or they described it in many ways, but the point of the survey was to point out the percentage. One group, I think it was 11%, just over 10%, which they were presenting as evidence that there is something beyond just pure materialism. There isn't just the ending and death. That if a 10% group, it's a statistically significant number, remember experiences, and these were people who had been defined as clinically dead by the medical profession. They had been they're brain dead, clinically dead, but then they were revived, and in that being revived, 11% had this recollection of some near-death experience, which made the authors of that question, well, what happens? What happens with consciousness? What happens with perception? What happens with thought? What happens with memory if there is something there? It's not just a chemical process. It's not just a machine that switches off. There's obviously something else going on. And the Buddha described that process that is the process of the mind breaking up and going according to karmic actions. The habits that we've created in this life will come to the fore. Just like the habits you created in this life, the way you do things come to fore in unexpected ways. For example, if you're suddenly frightened, you're suddenly faced with death, then we react in a particular way. And it will be our habits. For example, if you're a person who swears, then suddenly if you get a shock, then this language just comes out. If you have cultivated the mind not to get into that habit, then if you get a shock, you react in a different way. It's the habit patterns, the conditioning that comes up in those situations. And so that affects how we respond. And same too in the next life. It's what we've done in this life or in the past lives. It's how we live, how we act, how we speak. It accumulates and collects over time. We get skillful habit patterns and unskillful habit patterns. the important thing to do is to be cultivating skillful habit patterns. Because often we blame the person or blame ourselves, but it's actually the behavior which is blamable, or the behavior which is praisable. Good speech is just that, good speech. Good action is just that, good action. We see it as good, skillful, beneficial behavior and action to be cultivated and developed, and that will lead to karma, good karma in the future. So this quality of reflecting on the impermanent nature of existence is actually very important. It's a very important meditation subject. Most people think that if you think about death, you actually become very depressed. Actually quite the opposite. What I find as a monk is you're often dealing with people who are very depressed, who come to visit you, and they've never ever thought about death. They've never thought about death. It's usually the monks who I'm living with who think about death every day that are actually quite joyous to be around. And I wonder, well, why is that? Because it's that quality of, if you're faced with a sage, with a sword in front of you, you can't step back, you can't step forward. What's the most important thing to do? What's the most important time? Who's the most important person? So when you contemplate that I too will change, this life too will disappear, then we become very, very careful and very sensitive to how we deal with each other, how we interact, how we deal with ourselves, how we treat ourselves, and how we treat the world. And because, when we contemplate that all of us are going to die, then it's a great leveler, isn't it? It's a great leveler in life. Our sense of ego, our sense of importance fades away, and we develop a great sense of compassion to the world. That all beings will be like us, will pass away, and we are like all beings. It's what unifies us. There is a commonality there, a common quality. It's the basis of humanity. And when we have that, then compassion comes forth. And we don't treat people insensitively or unkindly. Why should we? It may be the last thing we do. It may be the last words we say. It may be our very last thought. Do we want to go with this thought, with this act? And when we think in this way, then we become very, very skillful in training the mind, because it's sobering. It sobers up. So often we get caught up in the pettiness and the little things of life. And when we measure it against the great standard of the final act, our final stage call, then it puts it in the context, doesn't it? So the little argument we may have had today, the disagreement, the problem at work, the problem with our family, the problem with money, the problem with our love life, and the problem with our health starts to fade away, doesn't become so important. We put it in a context and we can let go of it. We can put it down and put it aside. It doesn't matter. If this is the last thing we do, this is what matters, this moment. To be clear, to be compassionate, to be bright, to be wise, to be skillful, to be alert. That's what matters. And this is actually how we sober the mind up. We develop this clear awareness, awareness of the present